Hi, it's Monday, September 23rd, and we have a couple systems to talk about this week in the Atlantic and East Pacific. We have potential tropical cyclone 9, which is forecast to enter the Gulf of Mexico later this week and could become a strong hurricane as it nears the coastline of Florida. We have also got tropical storm John further west. This system has quickly developed off the coastline of Mexico and is likely nearing hurricane intensity right now. You can see on microwave imagery that we have a well-formed inner core structure that has been built over the nighttime hours, and this is likely going to continue to intensify as it comes towards the coast. And you can see here on this forecast from the Hurricane Center, they're expecting it to become a hurricane and potentially near major hurricane intensity as it comes into landfall sometime tomorrow morning or early afternoon. And rainfall will also be a significant impact as the system comes in. We could have localized areas exceeding 750 millimeters of rainfall, and especially with the high terrain here, that could lead to very significant flooding issues and mudslides across a wide region. The max winds are probably going to be confined to just the landfall spot, but rainfall is going to be much more widespread. You can see that even though we're not expecting landfall much anymore over here in eastern Mexico, we could still be getting a wide region with potential of heavy rainfall with potentially higher totals than 500 millimeters in some areas. A very significant rainfall event here, and this system could have some implications on potential tropical cyclone 9, which we'll begin talking about right now. Now, as we look at the big view of the Western Caribbean this morning, we can spot an area of low pressure that has developed south of Grand Cayman. This is likely an area of low pressure that developed near Nicaragua or Honduras last night and has translated north over the past 12 or 24 hours. Now, the system is not a tropical cyclone right now. It has not met that definition. Reason being is that this low is still fairly weak, but also all the convection is off towards the east. It's not organized in any way over the system's center. And it's likely because we have some shear. We do have a cutoff upper low, which cut off from the trough, which has now moved into the western Atlantic. And this is likely alongside perhaps some shear from Tropical Storm John, bringing some westerly or southwesterly flow towards our disturbance this morning. Now, the shear is forecast to abate as we go throughout the next couple of days, and models are very keen on the system intensifying steadily as it comes into the Gulf of Mexico. And now we're talking about a storm that could be a hurricane by the time it reaches western Cuba and the northeastern Yucatan Peninsula, which is a significant uptick. As if you remember from yesterday, we were talking about a storm that could be a high-end tropical storm getting to hurricane intensity in landfall in the Gulf of Mexico coastline of the U.S. Now, I talked about how John could have some impacts on PTC 9, and it could have an impact in a lot of ways. I mentioned one briefly there with the wind shear, and you can see that we do have some of this westerly flow coming from what appears to be where Tropical Storm John is, and this could be the outflow from Tropical Storm John trying to sneak beneath this upper level low towards our disturbance, and this is likely not being modeled all too well at all. You can see the GFS really does not show this happening all too much. This westerly shear is really just confined west of the Yucatan Peninsula. And this is likely an impact of model guidance struggling to pick up on John at all. This system is in a poor area for model guidance. These models tend to struggle with small storms in general, but especially when they're near high topography like John is, they can struggle even more. Think about Hurricane Otis last year. That system was small and was near the high topography of Mexico. And as a result, models really just did not pick up on that and resulted in a bad forecast overall, not just mainly for Otis's landfall intensity in Mexico. But this is now a case of where we're looking at a bad forecast for Mexico, but also a bad forecast that could be an impact of PTC 9, which is eventually going to impact multiple populated land masses. And this is a complex scenario that we're dealing with today. And we've seen in some model plots, and you can sort of see it today, that we're likely seeing some outflow from John impinge upon the storm, try and sneak south of this upper low to impact PTC 9. And if this continues, especially if the storm does get much stronger, that could impact the system in a negative way more than models anticipate. And maybe we see some downticks in the intensity as it comes towards the Gulf of Mexico. Right now, the general consensus is the system will be able to intensify and organize enough to be a hurricane by the time it gets to the southern Gulf of Mexico. Now, unfortunately, this shear is not going to be around forever. John, after it makes landfall, is going to dissipate fairly quickly thanks to the high topography in Mexico. So that shear will begin to abate. But a short-term impact greater than models had anticipated shear-wise could potentially make all the difference, perhaps. Maybe we could get a much weaker scenario because this is a sensitive forecast as well coming into the Gulf of Mexico. Now, overall, I don't think it's going to have as big of an impact to stop it from getting very strong in the Gulf of Mexico. And the unfortunate aspect is this is a fairly large storm. This is not going to be a small storm like John. So even if it is a Category 2 coming in to the coast, you could still be looking at very high surge amounts in a very surge-prone area of the coastline. Now, overall, models have upticked quite significantly on intensity as we go into the Gulf of Mexico. I mentioned that we were now looking at a hurricane coming into the Gulf of Mexico. As a result, we talked about this yesterday. How well developed is PTC 9 by the time it enters the Gulf of Mexico? That will likely decide everything as we have a volatile upper level pattern available to it. If the system is indeed a hurricane when it comes into the Gulf of Mexico, we're set for rapid intensification, perhaps all the way up to the coastline. You can see that as this enters the Gulf of Mexico on the GFS model, we have a very, very healthy upper level high and also a jet interaction taking place over the southern United States. This type of a pattern is historically shown to favor intensification of a hurricane and rapid intensification at that. And we also talked about potentially some southwesterly shear. You'll note that now west of the storm, this flow is not southwesterly. It's now more easterly in nature, likely because the storm is stronger, so it's able to fend off that shear at a greater efficiency. And as a result, the GFS is continuing what it showed yesterday and having a strong hurricane come into the Florida coast sometime late this week. And other models have shown scenarios similar to this. Models that have been showing it being sheared and disorganized, like the European, Canadian, and German models, are now showing something that could easily become a hurricane and something stronger than that as it comes north into the Gulf of Mexico. So we now have much more confidence today in a stronger solution coming into the eastern Gulf of Mexico coastline here. Now, track-wise, this is a bit of a tricky forecast overall, partially because we do have the difficulty of approach angle with the western Florida peninsula. One thing I do want to note quickly with John, as the system is bringing some more westerly flow, this is not just kept to the upper levels of the atmosphere. We have seen some model plots showing this to be more than just that one shallow layer of flow. So perhaps if it's more of a deep layer of westerly flow, perhaps that could work in a way to push the storm a little bit further east. We have seen some models push the system further east over the nighttime hours, although this could also be some impacts of the weak structure right now. In the structure it is right now, this low-level center can often get tugged around a lot. It can die off, a new one can reform somewhere, and there's a lot of uncertainty here. And this is just one piece of the puzzle, and a very complex piece at that. We also have difficulty in the model guidance trying to figure out the trough over the southern United States and also the ridge positioning off the southeast U.S. coast. These minor details in these two steering patterns, alongside that uncertainty with the initial position of PTC 9, is going to likely make all the difference. We've had model solutions try to put this even south of Tampa in some model runs, and we've even had some still trying to put this into the central or western Florida panhandle. Now, overall, this is not that big of a difference if you look at it on a longitude scale. This is not a big longitude error, but what it is a massive geographic error. If you have a landfall south of Tampa, or if you have a landfall here in Panama City, that's a huge distance, and that makes a massive difference for who gets what significant impact, who gets the most surge, strongest winds, And this could even allow, a little bit more or a little bit less intensification time because of ocean time. And this is a very sensitive forecast, which I feel like we've been dealing with a lot in the past couple of years. And I know it's getting tiring here in Florida to deal with storms like this coming your way, but don't let that tiring feeling impact your preparedness anyway. We still need to prepare for this system accordingly. And right now, I would say if you're in Florida, pretty much from, say, Fort Myers all the way up to, say, Destin or Pensacola, make sure you're preparing for this and make sure your hurricane preparedness kit is ready. And I would be preparing as if this was going to be a major hurricane coming your way, especially if you're in Tampa all the way up to, say, Panama City or Destin. That's where I would say prepare for a major hurricane. The storm could track anywhere within this area, and it's better to be safe than sorry, like I talked about yesterday. You can see in the current Hurricane Center forecast, that's their general spread of their forecast track. This white area shows where the center could track. And we have, like I mentioned, areas from, say, Tampa all the way to Panama City and Destin. And like I said, prepare for a major hurricane. This forecast point here on the forecast is 110 miles per hour. A major hurricane starts at 111 miles per hour. So we're pushing that boundary, and this is not even, this is below the current intensity consensus. A lot of models are suggesting that the system could get potentially up to Category 4 intensity. Now, I want to point out, Category 3, Category 4, of course there's differences wind-wise with that. But even if it is, say, even just a Cat 2, this system being larger will likely still bring a large surge to areas along this coast, which is very susceptible to storm surge. And I know, especially in Tampa Bay, it's getting tiring dealing with storms like Ian and Idalia, and you keep hearing on the news like this could be a really bad storm for Tampa. This is another case where if it takes the right track, it could really be bad with storm surge impacts and wind impacts into that metropolitan area. And I don't want that tiring feeling that we've had with these past couple of years to come in and impact preparedness. Now, I do want to reload this real quick because for Mexico and Cuba, we do have tropical storm warnings and hurricane watches in place. You can see in blues and pinks, as we are expecting the system to come through as a high-end tropical storm or low-end hurricane, as you can see on that forecast. Now, the system will be moving pretty quickly up north, and while this is good news for the coastline, it may lessen the time overall for impacts of storm surge and wind. This will likely translate to a greater wind threat further inland, and areas inland in Florida and Georgia may need to be also preparing for potential hurricane force winds, and even southeastern Alabama if the system does come west enough. So keep that in mind as the system comes north. But it'll also be tracking further north and northwest and could be bringing some rainfall and flooding issues to points further north and west after that point in the forecast. Now, in terms of when you should be prepared, in Cuba and the Yucatan Peninsula, the earliest time that tropical storm force winds could approach is tomorrow morning. So preferably have your preparations done by tonight. You may have some time tomorrow morning before conditions fully deteriorate, but especially in Cuba, I would have them done by tonight. In the US, mainly looking for landfall spots, Wednesday evening is when tropical storm force winds are probably going to arrive. They may arrive sometime at early Thursday, but in general, have your preparations done by Wednesday evening. That's a good bet. And if there are any evacuation orders issued, we don't have any storm surge forecasts issued, but we know from this area of the coast and historical storms that storm surge can be very bad in this part of the coast. If you're along the coast and you're issued into an evacuation order, please heed it. I've talked about this with several storms before, even with just Francine a few weeks back. Storm surge is not something you want to chance with. Storm surge has a very significant impact. It is the leading cause of fatalities in hurricanes, and the key message is if you're put in an evacuation order, heed it. Don't stick around. Come back after the storm, and it'll be worth it. You don't want to risk anything with this. Houses and property, that can be replaced. Lives cannot. Now, for areas further inland, for, say, Georgia or Alabama, preparation should be done by, say, Wednesday evening as well. You may have some time by Thursday morning to prepare for the system, especially depending on track and timing. But in general, Wednesday evening is when you should have your tropical storm and even some hurricane preparedness done, especially in southern Georgia as the system does push in. Now, I want to mention one more thing before I go. Rainfall is forecast to be pretty heavy in Cuba as the system does come through in the Cayman Islands. You can see a wide forecast region of 150 to 200 millimeters of rainfall, with some localized areas getting upwards of 300 millimeters or higher, especially in western Cuba. We are forecast to get some significant rainfall in the Yucatan Peninsula, but as a result of the still remaining westerly or southwesterly shear upon PTC 9 by this time, all that rainfall will likely be over Cuba, so we're probably going to get the highest totals there. And rainfall forecast and storm surge forecast will come out probably later today or tomorrow for areas of the southeast U.S. with the system as it comes north. And we'll talk about those impacts when they do come out. And I'll have more videos as this storm progresses further north as we look at yet another significant Gulf storm in yet another year. I think 4 years in a row now. That's all that I've got for today. I know there was a lot of information in this. I'll leave links to the Hurricane Center, weather offices in Cuba and Mexico that I can find, weather offices in the U.S., and I think it's prepare.gov or ready.gov, I think it is, that website. I will leave a link to that so you can know how to prepare for the hurricane as it comes your way. Like I said, I'll have more videos out this week as the storm comes through, but stay safe in Cuba, Cayman Islands, and Mexico, and Mexico as well for Tropical Storm John as those storms come through. That's all that I've got for now. Thanks for watching.